Hi, and welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, the founder and chief exec of Intuitive Talent Solutions. We work with leading transport organisations in the UK and bring them together with a diverse and talented candidate network for interim and permanent roles. The people who know me know that I like to immerse myself in good conversation. And over the course of the podcast series, I will be joined by some exceptionally talented leaders from the UK transport sector to talk about their careers, the industry, leadership, challenges and opportunities, and much more besides. I do hope that you'll join me and that you'll be inspired by my fabulous guests and their intuitive insights. Today, I'm joined by Paul Evans, Chief Executive Officer of Carlisle Support Services, a facilities management company working across a number of industry sectors, but with 50% of the workforce focused on the transport industry. Paul shares his career story with me and some cracking quotes, actually, in terms of his work ethic and where that comes from, and where his passion and motivation stems from too. Good morning. Paul Evans, Chief Exec of Carlisle Support Services. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Nina. I'm really looking forward to the next sort of 30-40 minutes and hopefully, obviously, explaining a bit more about me and obviously in terms of my views of the rail sector.
Yeah, brilliant. You and I have just had a short discussion off camera in terms of my original objectives for this podcast, which remain very much the same today as they were back in October 2020 when we started it. And that is to showcase the wide variety of careers that are available for people in the UK transport industry. And I quite often, if I say to my daughter's peer group, have you considered transport, whether that's rail or bus, as a career option? And the answer that I generally get is, well, I don't want to drive a train, or I don't want to drive a bus. And so I'm on a personal mission to let people know that there are literally hundreds of other jobs that you can do in transport that are massively rewarding, because as an industry, as you and I both know, it is an amazing place to work. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story. This is much more about listening to you than it is listening to me. So I'm going to hand over, Paul, and I'm going to ask you to take us back right to the beginning of your career and tell us your story up until right to present day, in terms of what a week in the life of the chief exec of Carlisle Support Services looks like. So over to you.
Okay, well, many years back, probably in terms, if I go through the early stage, and I'll try and fast forward to try and when it comes into the transport sector, because it's not all been in the transport arena, which I actually think is quite interesting, because I think that gives a different perspective of obviously working across different industries and different sectors. But grew up in Sheffield, son of a police officer and son of a nurse. So in terms, that's my working class background, as it would be. Started in supermarkets, so in terms of stacking shelves, and then progressed up to retail management. So that's probably where I cut my early sort of time in management, in terms of obviously trying to learn how to manage, influence, and motivate people. I then fell into the recruitment sector, so early 20s, went into your space, Nina, recruiting professionals for different industries, mainly from a commercial and marketing bias. Loved it. And again, probably what you find in terms of it, the actual ability and variety of speaking to so many different people every single day, and helping people with their careers. So did that for a couple of years. And I think then a trait starts happening in my career is that I end up working for people who I ended up doing work for. And that's how I ended up in what is now my main area, which is the facilities management support services arena. And I'll come on to how that works into Carlisle being in terms of the transport sector later on. But I was offered a job by one of my clients who was looking for a commercial, in terms of biased person, which is what I was told was going to be the job, in terms of I was going to move into, in terms of trying to help them grow their business. But it turned into being that when I first arrived, I was spending 12 months as a security officer. So I was a patrol officer going out, locking and unlocking buildings. Why was I sold the dream? I was told that this would come in the future, that I'd obviously move into area management and operational management. And I did, but the first 12 months of my exposure into the facilities world was as a patrol officer going around locking and unlocking buildings. So I think that's relevant because if anybody knows anything about me, my finance director would say that she would want it the other way. I'd probably much prefer to be out on a platform or at a depot than to be in a boardroom. And I think that comes back from early days in my career of really sort of starting out on the ground, doing the job that I expect in terms of the people that have to face the challenges that we deploy. And therefore, that's not changed as I've gone through. And then mid-20s, I sort of moved into area management, operational management, commercial roles, moved around a different number of organisations, some real large blue chips, and then moved into some medium-sized entities. And then I got into I would say probably mid-30s or early 30s, and I stepped out of the facilities industry and went back into recruitment. So I went back into a business called Blue Arrow. Blue Arrow were a large industrial recruiter supplying hundreds and thousands of people to some major brand names like John Lewis, JCB, Toyota, to help them with their peaks and demands. And in that group that Blue Arrow was part of was this little small business called Carlisle Support Services. So I'm up to around about 36, 37 now in my age. I don't mind sharing that, 45. So in terms of for the last 8.5 years, I've had the real pleasure of being responsible for Carlisle Support Services. There was a knock on my door when I was at Blue Arrow by the then group chief exec and said, we want somebody who understands the support services arena. And we've been thinking that it'd be a perfect opportunity for you to move from what was a £400 million business to a £30 million business as MD. So moving from commercial director at Blue Arrow to MD at Carlisle Support Services. And still to this day, people say, why did you do that? And I think it's probably one of the most rewarding and satisfying decisions that I've ever made, is that Carlisle was perfectly formed at that. It was in a bad state, though, probably not too dissimilar what we might talk around some of the challenges that we face in this sector, in the rail sector. Yeah. But it was an opportunity for me to really come into a business to take some ownership and put some passion back into an opportunity for us to grow. And we've gone from 1,600 employees to 5,000 employees. Now, 2,400 of them, so nearly half of the business, is in the rail sector. So we work for 15 train operating companies. We supply 15 different types of role. And as you said, there are hundreds of roles in this sector, but those 15 range from revenue protection, train presentation, gate line, through to security, through to a driver in terms of controls, and other areas of customer service that we do for all of those 15 train operating companies. And transport has been probably, in terms of in Carlisle, the business goes back over sort of 3 decades. It's been a real sort of part of our business in terms of for that time. As leader, I'm blessed with a senior management team who have really, in terms of over years, over my 8.5 years here, have excelled. And as I said, whilst we've taken the employee numbers up from 1,600 to 5,000, we've also seen our annual revenues grow from what was 30 million up to 130 million. Wow. Wider transport, we look after some amazing places. We're responsible for the operational teams at Eurotunnel. So if ever you've gone through Eurotunnel, the people who obviously check your passports, that ultimately in terms of check that you have got the correct tickets and that welcome you and then also load you onto the trains, are all Carlisle. We work in the ports operation, so we look after clients such as Liverpool Cruise Terminal, Portsmouth International Port, and a whole host of others in terms of not necessarily just rail, but we also work with some combined authorities such as Merseytravel and West Yorkshire combined authorities, and that gives us a real exposure not only in terms of into one area of transport, but also coming into what I think will be a more opportunity for the transport network around the devolved and local services that certainly some of the metro mayors are very keen to drive, and I see that as a real opportunity, and I can see that across different sectors outside of the rail industry where people are keen to take back ownership for local services to be delivered for their communities.
Yeah, very much so.
That probably gives you a bit of a plotted history, and just as a bit of a quirkiness, my other bit of career is that outside of running Carlisle, and whilst I'm sat here in Cheltenham Racecourse, this evening I'll be refereeing at Leighton Orient against Blackpool because I'm a professional football referee as well. So a very busy life in terms of in work and then outside of work. You talk about your daughter potentially, obviously looking at what she wants to do as she develops. My son, who's 15 now, my eldest son, I've got two sons, actually is even going to be an accountant or a train driver. So he's definitely, in terms of pricked his interest in and looking forward to potentially exploring one of those two careers. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you for that. That was a brilliant trot through where you've been and what you've done. It's the bit about being told, kind of going into a role and then arriving and it being quite different to what you were expecting in that security officer position. When that happened, Paul, and I know you to be a really positive, glass half full kind of person.
Yeah.
When that happened, did you just take that on the chin and get on with it, or did you have a bit of a grumble to yourself and think, hang on a minute, what the heck's going on here?
I think probably at the time of my life, I think when we all look back, and we're probably a little bit more of a happy-go-lucky type of person. We've not yet found family, or not yet found a mortgage, or the sort of challenges that come with having an earnings. I certainly was, I guess, probably disappointed in the first sense. But one of the things, and I think probably one of my inspirations that I would try and leave you with, is that I've been surrounded by some amazing mentors. And I mean probably people who have taken risks on me. And therefore, I think at the time, the lady who had made the promise equally became a very inspirational mentor to me, in terms of she did manage the disappointment well. She did make me a promise though, and that promise was that, look, you're only going to do this for 12 months, get it sorted, and then the things will move on and you will be given opportunities. And I think throughout my entire career, I can probably go back to, and there's still people, and I was just speaking to one of my old bosses this week, in terms of people I can go back to, and still when I'm having those lull times, and as CEO, even though sometimes you have to be head up all the time, you're not always head up as a CEO, and fellow leaders, and at any level, not just CEO. Managers sometimes want to be head down. They want to obviously have that time to chill out, but there is that need to make sure that wherever you are leading teams, your team will look to you for inspiration and motivation. So that initial disappointment of going in and actually going, yeah, great, one sense, we've got an opportunity, we're going to be in terms of an area manager or a commercial lead on a project, but then going in and saying, well, actually, there is no yet team. You need to go and create that team. I think it was an immediate disappointment, but allowed me to sort of bounce off other people and get that energy back quite quickly.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's always a massive value in reflecting back to say that every single thing, from my personal experience, if you look back and my career has been a roller coaster of a ride, and you look back and you think sometimes there was parts of my career where I said, I really hate this, actually. Not enjoying what I'm doing at all. But when you reflect back, you can see that every single thing that you have done has led you to where you are today. And it's easier to say that when you're at the other end of it, not when you're in the thick of it. But sometimes the things that do disappoint you and that are not quite what you were expecting them to be are the biggest learning opportunities. And for me, that being on the front line and experiencing what it feels like to be a security officer, locking and unlocking the buildings, has given you that the approach that has really contributed to your approach today, where we see you out and about on the network so much. And I know you've said to me that Matt, the rest of your board or your finance director in particular might want you in the office a bit more. But for you, being out and about amongst your teams gives you a really great energy, doesn't it? It gives you something back in terms of your role.
I think it gives you an insight as well that you just don't get. You don't get it, and that's not saying that you just should not listen to other aspects of your working life, because every single input is useful. But being able to spend time, and equally, I mean, it's got consequences. I will be honest with you. There's obviously a consequence. You're not at home then. You're not around, obviously, those that give you that time and that freedom to do what you do. But I think the ability, and I don't mean doing it sort of 12 o'clock in a daytime, but actually going out on an evening, where the rail industry, and that's probably in terms of where it hopefully will modernise towards, is a 7-day and even to some degree, probably 24-hour operation in some areas. If you'll think about train press and getting the trains ready to come back into service the next day. And you will learn so much from my point of view as a leader. I see things like, why do we do that? Why do we actually create that sort of process? Because somebody in head office will have dreamt it up and gone, that works for me.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually always work on the ground for some of the actual people who are the family. We call them family members. So we're very passionate about if you're part of the Carlisle family. That doesn't mean, by the way, we don't have disagreements, divorces, and everything that goes on in the family.
Absolutely, it all happens in a family.
We do want people to actually have a voice in that family and be able to feed back. And I think that presence on the ground. And I remember back 8.5 years ago when I started this journey with Carlisle, one of my old customers, again, somebody I call a friend, he genuinely said, and when we were talking about how we're going to change the industry, I'm going to try and really, obviously, in terms of put the employee and the family member at the centre of what we do. He said, I'll only ever believe this if I see your frontline staff being as passionate about it as you are, Paul. Right. And I think that's quite a barometer to say, once you can get the cheerleaders or the champions to be coming from the front line, and I think there's a challenge sometimes in our sector is to make sure that we don't forget those voices that are on the front line, because without anybody delivering those services, there is no operation, there is no solution or no actual sort of passenger delight. And I think that's really the biggest thing, that every time we go back and we make a business decision, we sort of try and think, well, actually walk a day in the life of the actual person who's got to deliver this service. And over time, we've invested in areas. We were one of the first support services business to bring in what's called income streaming. Now, this might seem very bizarre in terms of, but the biggest financial hardship is when something happens when you've got no money. So if you're on a frontline service and the car breaks down or the heating fails in the house, you used to obviously have the risk of going to payday loans companies. Right. So we increased increased and introduced an opportunity for them to be able to download their wages before payday. Now that idea only came because one evening I'm sat on a platform with one of our cleaning staff who said and told me the story of, can you give me, and genuinely, and it was a heartfelt thing. She said, look, Paul, you're the CEO of the business. Can you lend me some money? And I ultimately went, that's reality. That is reality of that person, that they don't know how they're going to pay for something tomorrow. So overnight we said, well, we've got to do this right. It can't just be that Paul lends money to everybody because that becomes uncontrolled. It's not fair. So we worked with a partner and we linked it into our time and attendance system, and now people are genuine. And when people do leave our employee, there's an opportunity where you'll still keep in touch with them. One of the things I'll come back to, I really wish my company would be doing this or doing that you did do. Some of the times there are subtle things that people don't always obviously appreciate until you've not got them, and then you go somewhere else and they're not there. But yeah, going back to your original question, is I think that's the real bit for me, is about being able to relate and in terms of sort of empathise as a leader, that you can actually see into the life of what the people who are doing the job are. Because I said it a few weeks ago at our annual conference, it's great to be the CEO, but it means nothing if you actually obviously in terms of don't have the support of all the staff below you.
Exactly. And we've seen over the years, haven't we, the pyramid being inverted in terms of where the people that matter as far as delivering the service to the customer are your frontline team. And as chief exec, you're not at the top of that pyramid, you're at the bottom supporting the rest of them. And I think that is, there are 7 people in my team, so we are a tiny business in comparison. So hearing you talk about this and acknowledging that you've got 5,000 employees, people within the Carlisle family, that you need to cascade this message to. What strikes me very much, Paul, is that you've been out there, you've had that conversation with the cleaner who's told you that she's fallen on hard times and any chance of a loan or an advance or whatever. And first and foremost, you've listened to that and kind of you've taken it on board, realised that, I'd like to do something to help, but I can't just kind of do it willy-nilly. There needs to be a system. And then you've gone and designed something and introduced something which helps that individual. But if you hadn't been out there in the first place and hadn't been prepared to sit down with that person and have a normal person-to-person chat rather than chief exec to employee, then that wouldn't have happened. So I think there's something very key about your leadership style in that. And just wanted to take you back, and obviously we need to get on to your plans for rail and get my magic wand out of my bag. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, I'm really delighted you've mentioned that mentors have been a key part of your career success so far. I'm a big fan of that. I'm lucky I've had mentors myself throughout my career. I've got some brilliant people now around me. And I also mentor people, and I'm sure you do as well. So you kind of pay it forward. The other bit that you said that I wanted to pick up on was that you've recognised that there have been people throughout your career who've been prepared to take a risk on you. What is it about you that makes people feel that they can take a risk on you?
So one of the inspirations in my life, as probably like many people, is you look to your parents. And my dad used to say two things. He said many things to me, probably that aren't necessarily great to read, but it's great. One of the things, I'll come on to the second one in a moment. He said, and it's a Yorkshire phrase. He said, "Graft covers up many sins, Paul." And I used that so many times. I was giving a talk to some people just about to leave school in a few weeks' time, talking about careers, and I effectively, obviously, said that will get you through so much. People are more willing if they see that you are resilient, that you're energetic, and that you're hardworking. And I've made some, I don't mind sharing, I will share them probably a bit more in detail when we're together, but I've made some horrendous mistakes in my career in terms of when I've done things that have cost money and have had impact. But I've worked tirelessly then to go back and understand and learn from that, and then to actually try and say that with genuine integrity and honesty to try and put that right. So I think that hard work is probably that mentors will look at people and will go, did that? And probably also, in fact, if you think about what you're now telling down to your people that you're mentoring, we've all probably made, or all the mentors all the way through life have probably made similar mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think it's how you react and how you respond to those that probably give a mentor the opportunity and confidence to go, do you know what, I see something. I absolutely see something that's going to be there. And I think that loyalty, I think probably one thing I would say about, I've been fortunate in a number of roles as well over as you get through your life. I've noticed that in my early 20s, it was like what I'd call, and you see this in recruitment, these 2-year hops, because you try to find either your growth plan or you're trying to find some stability in it. And then you get to your mid-30s, and I think I had a 6.5 year thing, and it's now 8.5 years. I think the other bit around that, which probably comes more in later life or looking upwards to mentoring, is probably loyalty as well. I think people who can see that you are hardworking, but also that you're loyal, that you're not going to just drop everything and try and run over the top of the hills when it becomes a bit hard in that regard. And then the other thing that my dad said, and it links back to football, this in terms of that I did used to play football as well as referee football, and he used it in a way to sort of give me an analogy to football. He said, no, and I was never the best footballer, by the way. I mean, people who have played with me would say, yeah, you weren't the best technical football. But my dad used to say, nobody teaches you how far or how fast you run on a pitch. And I think that was down to self-motivation. And there are days, and I'm sure they're less frequent than they are actually frequent. There are days when I'm sure we all do it. The alarm goes off, and you roll over and you go, get out of bed. But that bit about that self-motivation and that actual ability about, well, there's only you who's going to drive yourself today. There's only you who's going to make you actually go and do that extra visit. And one of the things that I guess probably in Carlisle, and it's a pleasure in one sense, but it's also a hindrance. And I'll use Liverpool as an example. So in Liverpool, we have a great opportunity that effectively, that wherever I go in Liverpool, whether it be Merseyrail, whether it be Northern, whether it be Transpennine, whether it be Mersey Travel, and again, across wider areas, I can more or less walk across Liverpool city centre and know that I could turn left or right and I'm going to bump into a Carlisle person. And that's replicating different cities in London and Birmingham and across Manchester. As CEO, that you don't feel a bit guilty that if I spend 10 minutes with one person, but then I don't spend the 10 minutes with the next person, some days you can walk in terms of it. But I think that ability to obviously be in control of your own self-motivation probably the other major thing that my dad taught me quite early on.
Yeah.
In terms of that, you do need mentors and you do need people to motivate you, but there's also an element of self-motivation that I think you have to try and find your equal balance to keeping yourself motivated.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love it. I've never heard it before, and you saying it out loud, it's so obvious when you say it that nobody's teaching you how far or how fast to run. You've got to want to do that. You've got to want to, first of all, you've got to want to be on the pitch, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
And once you're on the pitch, you've got to be prepared to, yes, you've got to be technically good because you've got to know the order of play and you know what everybody else is playing. But you can't stand still there, can you? You can't just plod along. You've got to put the effort in. And I absolutely love that. It's kind of giving me a real clear image in my head of what self-motivation looks like. And I guess also some teamwork stuff would play into that metaphor. And because if you've been running like the clappers for the first 40 minutes of the first half and you're kind of lagging a little bit in terms of energy ready for the half-time whistle to blow, you know, you need to look at your teammates to be able to pick up the slack for the last 5 minutes, and they need to recognise that you need some help too. So there's we could take that quite a long way, that metaphor. I like that one. I like that. Really great response, I think, in terms of that hard work, the resilience, the energy. Quite often guests come on the podcast and they tell me in the course of their career story, and they'll say, well, yeah, I was lucky because, and I always kind of want to come back to that and say, for the people who are watching, who are earlier on in their career, there's some lessons in this in relation to what type of person, what type of character you are, which has helped in your career success, and having that work ethic that I'm gonna put the graft in, because then people trust that I'm here to do the job and I want to get the job done. But then also recognizing that whilst everyone else around you can give you all the help that they can, if you're not running fast on the pitch, then it isn't going to work. You've got to have that self-motivation. I love that. Thank you. We're going to move on to the bit now where I promote myself into the fairy godmother of the transport industry. I need to get myself a different outfit for this, don't I? I feel like some frills are coming on. Get my magic wand out, and I'm saying to you, Paul, if you were running the industry, if we were putting you into this kind of guiding mind, if you like, the top job, what are the 3 things that you'd like to see being done differently?
So I guess the first thing, again, this is the beauty of working across 15 different train operating companies and seeing it from different angles. And there are some amazing things that are done. But I think probably my first thing is to stop doing things in isolation. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I see that, and I get the reasons why it's set up in the way that it's set up, but I think some of the more collaboration that needs to come forward, some of this handovers or handshakes that could be better done, where one train operating company maybe hands something over to another train operating company who takes responsibility. And I think that's coming. I certainly see that some of the discussions now, we're obviously in a political year. We were all at the Bradshaw briefing, and we saw the current, obviously, in terms of the minister and the shadow minister. And we wait probably for the next 2 or 3 weeks. By the time this comes out, hopefully it'll be out in terms of from what the shadow minister's manifesto for rail might look like compared to the current ministers in terms of plans for the industry. And I sort of, if I'm being honest, I sort of, like's the wrong word. I admire both of them at the moment, in fairness. I think that obviously Hugh's got a job where he's currently in the chair. And obviously the shadow minister coming in has got the ability to sort of paint pictures at the moment. And then obviously whatever happens in the election will be whoever gets their opportunity to deliver. But I think between the 2 of them, I think that they probably both know that there's a need for some of that change and some of that need to modernise and how we move forward and how we create. And I think I'll come on to probably the second point of that, which is my sort of second wish, and this is right down your sort of track, because you did mention it at the Bradshaw briefing. We need some new talent. We need to bring some new talent into this. Whether I don't necessarily just mean young talent, and I've said this to a few people in senior roles, is that sometimes I look at leaders who run organisations in this space, and I sometimes think that what's immensely benefited me over the years is being able to move around different industries and different sectors and take something. We do it every year. We do it what's called our innovation lab, and we put cross country or Avante. They'll sit on a table with Liverpool Football Club, and they'll then sit on another table with Tesco, and they just share ideas about common challenges, not necessarily about rolling stock or a passenger, but i.e. it'll be a business problem that can be related to that Jaguar Land Rover might solve it in this way, or somebody else solve it in that. And I think that second point for me. So the first one is around, obviously, in terms of collaboration. In terms of that, the second point would be bringing some new, real sort of radical thinking. I don't mean management consultants. I don't mean somebody who's just going to sit in for a couple of years and then disappear. But trying to bring that talent in either at grad level, at entry level, or obviously at leadership level. And that's not being critical of what's there today, because I think actually in terms of it, I think it's just doffing your cap up or looking over another fence and actually sort of seeing, well, actually, why does it? And I do it all the time. I was out last night in terms of for dinner with some industry colleagues in London, and I sort of said, I wonder what the pharmaceutical industry do, or I wonder what the defence industry do in this regard, or I wonder what the utilities or the gas and oil companies do. And actually, that's the beauty of being a CEO. You can reach over that fence and you can actually sort of say, what do you do in your sector here? And there are some great people who are obviously in terms of able to share that insight. I think that'd be my biggest thing. And when you told that, and I'm going to ask you to actually, you'll know it off the top of your head, when you said the average age of somebody in our industry, what is it, Nina? What did you say the average age of somebody in our industry is now?
Well, I think it was Hugh that quoted that the average age of a driver was 52. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I do know that 40% of our drivers are age 50 or over. So the two figures that scare me are the fact that we've got 75,000 people eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. So we've got an ageing workforce who could actually choose to walk out the door in the next 5 years. And equally scary, if not more so, less than 4% of the workforce in rail are age 25 and younger.
That was it. That was the step.
We're not putting people into the pipeline. So in terms of a succession plan, a talent pipeline, we need to be much better at this. And of course, we're in competition with all those industries that you just mentioned. So if you're going to, as a grad or as a school leaver, if you're going to the equivalent of what would be a milk round and you're looking at all of the different industry sectors you could work in, I think we've got some way to go in order to make rail a first choice. Because I don't think we're showing ourselves off in our best light at the moment. But saying that, to your point about bringing some senior talent in from different industry sectors, we've noticed a change. So I've been working with the industry for 11 years now. And at the beginning, if I was working on a senior search assignment and I said to a client, we've done the job briefing and we've kind of talking about the recruitment process, and I would say, how open are you to seeing CVs of people from outside sector? And I would get this sharp intake of breath, quickly followed by, no, it's a very complex sector. You need to understand rail. You need to understand it. You absolutely can't be from outside. That has changed. To the point now where we regularly will have clients saying to us, and we definitely are interested in seeing people from outside sector. So I think 39% of our placements have been from outside transport. So introducing that different perspective, different experience, and transferring the knowledge from other sectors into transport, I think is really important, as you said.
I think interesting, just looking back internally. So in Carlisle, I mean, one of the biggest attrition factors for Carlisle is we lose a lot of people to the actual train companies themselves, which is people say, do I get frustrated with that? No, because it's a great actual way of bringing new talent in. And typically people who will join us to do roles that are frontline, that are customer service, they might not even have thought about the rail. They've come to Carlisle because they know that Carlisle's a support services business, and they might have wanted to work at Ascot or obviously at Liverpool, but they might work at Tesco, they might work at Jaguar. But then when you actually say, have you considered the rail sector? Their eyes do actually light up. Oh, I didn't realise that I could go and do this. And actually, I have a varied initial time in the industry, because one of the things that, I guess probably linking into this talent, and one of the things that I'm really keen to support is trying, and somebody said you're going back to what British Rail was bought to a certain degree, but I think one of the things I would love to be able to try and do is to create more opportunities around the apprenticeships, that people coming in around general rail apprenticeships. And in Carlisle, we've got the brilliance in terms of the fact that we've got 15 different types of rod. The challenge is the geography sometimes, because we haven't got all 15 in one area. So obviously, in terms of moving people around, and interestingly, and I suppose at my time when I was coming through, I think the newer generations are less interested about relocating. That's something that we've just found. Whereas I was, as a management trainer, somebody said we want to run a store in Middlesbrough. Off I went for 6 months. I went to live in Birmingham. And I think that's a generational thing. I think that people are more happy, or they know they can get what they want in their local communities again. But I think that this, in the rail sector, this potential to work with partners, whether it be Carlisle, whether it be obviously into rural organisations, the beauty that we've got is we can put people into these apprenticeship schemes. And the apprentice levy, to a certain degree, is an underused tax.
Very much so,
and we need to try and work up as a government and as an industry how we can better use some of that apprenticeship levy, whether you're a support organisation like Carlisle, a train company, or the wider in terms of industry as a whole.
Yeah, very much so. NSAR, so the National Skills Academy for Rail, are their calculations state that we should be bringing 5,000 apprentices into the industry, and at the minute we're at 2,500. So it's better than it was, but it's still nowhere near the amount that we need to have. So there is lots to do here.
So if I've given you two, then I've given you this collaboration, and I've given you in terms of talent.
Yeah.
My final one, and it's not going to be any surprise to anybody when they listen to this on the podcast, is the need for pace. Now I've got a director of rail strategy, a gentleman I'm sure that you know, a gentleman called Steve Sear, and me and Steve have this yin-yang relationship where as you rightly said, I'm that sort of complete optimism. Oh, we'll do this, and we'll do it tomorrow, and we'll do that, and we'll run again, and we'll run again, and we'll run again. And Steve genuinely will come back and go, ooh. And it's like, and that's not a negative. He's sort of on my shoulder sometimes, sort of thing. And I guess I get frustrated, and we are going to get frustrated for a period of time whilst the election takes hold. But I hope, and my real wish is that once whatever happens, whoever's in the chair, that genuinely we get on and move at pace. I think this is the biggest thing this industry needs now, is it needs to be able to allow, whether they be train operating companies or whether they be leaders or whether they be obviously DOHL, whoever's our leading organisations, to basically, through the guiding mind, whatever that will be. It was nice to know that the Shadow Minister still referred to this arm's length body. So he still referred to that there will be somebody controlling it. That's not necessarily in terms of the current landscape today. And I think that bit then needs to empower people to get on and move at pace. And I think that's probably something that I've seen outside when I talk about the farmer, or I talk about the defence industry, or the utilities and gas, or the communications industry. That ability that, I don't know, if you look at the events world, if Liverpool want to build a new stand, they go off and build a new stand. They can get on with it. It's in their control. It's in their demise.
Yeah. I didn't appreciate at all until I started working with the industry how much politics influences it, and that kind of control by the government in terms of what we can do, how we can do it, when we can do it, how much we can spend on it, all the rest of it. I feel quite strongly, and I know I'm not on my own with this, that clearly the government supported the industry during the pandemic when we were told not to use trains and buses. So support was required, otherwise the whole thing clearly would have fallen apart. But since then, this kind of the level of micromanagement, and with the greatest respect to the people who are doing the micromanagement, they don't know as much as the people that they're micromanaging. So it's all the wrong way around, and the frustration levels are building. And I think it's testimony to the passion that people have for the rail industry is why they're still here. Because there's quite a lot of people in really senior positions who are getting increasingly frustrated by the situation we're in. But the whole industry feels like it's in stasis, doesn't it? It's like we're waiting for something. Well, whether the election happens in May, as we're hearing some rumours, or whether we have to wait till the end of the year, either way, I don't think we can wait. And it's kind of making me come back to your metaphor about the football pitch again. Nobody else can tell you how fast to run once you're on there. And I think as an industry, we've got to pick up the pace. I know that that's easier said than done. And I know that there are blockers in every left, right, and centre. But
I, I think if I put all those three things together, collaboration, talent, and pace, and I'm going to call out some names here. I think some of them you've already had on here. So there's some amazing talent. So you mentioned in terms of when we were off camera about Catherine O'Brien being your first,
yeah,
and obviously Chris Jackson, who's gone in there. Then you've got other people like Johnny Wiseman. So you've then got, I mean, what Northern have done, Mark Powell's, in terms of some of the things, the areas that we support Northern on revenue protection.
Yeah.
So the bit about the talent is there, and I suppose that's the collaboration bit. And then if I overlay pace into it, if you put those three things in, you've already got the mix of the cake.
Yes.
Somebody, and I suppose that's the bit we're waiting for. We're waiting for somebody to get the ability to get the wooden spoon out and start stirring the cake together.
Stirring it. Yeah.
I think that's really where
I'm with you. I'm with you on all of those three wishes, Paul. Very much so. And you've mentioned the word passion a few times when you were talking us through your career story, and I see that very much when, as I said earlier, when you're out and about and the stuff you post on LinkedIn. I know that you're very passionate about your people and also about the industry that they work in and that they serve, the passengers that they serve. So we will keep going. We will keep our heads up, keep the glass half full, and it will all be all right in the end. Because as the saying goes, if it's not all right, then it's not the end. So to bring this conversation to a close, I'm going to kind of bring you back to that scenario you mentioned earlier, where all of us have the odd day every now and again where the alarm goes off and we think, oh, right, okay, I'd rather not. When on the odd occasion that you might feel like that, where do you get your personal inspiration and energy from? What fills you back up again so that you can get out there and work your magic?
So I guess probably to be a servant is probably the wrong word. I won't use that too much, but my entire bit is to, as you spun the pyramid upside down, and I suppose that's my real bit, is that I serve the people who work for me and the customers that have been able to choose and obviously given us their business. I think that's my bit in terms that motivates me, is then to go home knowing that I've been able to give something back to those people in whatever form that is, whether it's time, whether it's energy, whether it's actually commitment or knowledge. I think that the bit that gets me out, and people do say this, and they genuinely say, well, when do you switch off? And I do get downtime, even though contrary to many people's belief of my LinkedIn or my social media, I do. I think
you do stop occasionally.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that I would say is that the other thing to keep yourself motivated is hold dear to what your goals are and what your own ambitions are. And you don't need to make them all public. I've got a very clear view of where I want to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and some of that is public and some of that is personal. I'll never share some of that, but I think that's the other bit, is that as long as you know that whilst the bad day might be the bad day today, but you're heading towards something and you're progressing.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'd tell, is probably the final bit of it, in terms of people who might be looking around their career and their life, is only ever compare yourself to yourself. Do never go comparing yourself. And even at CEO level now, there are better CEOs than me. There's people paid better, or there's people that are dealt with in a different way. But all I look at is am I moving forward in myself? Am I being able to keep myself motivated to my own goals? I think there will be down days and dark days in everybody's careers. But I think as long as you can see that you're progressing, and if you're not, then obviously take some time out in terms of get yourself remotivated, re-energized, and speak to those mentors and those people that you can trust, that have got your back, that will give you also reality, because sometimes you want them people to pull you down a peg and say, actually, I think you're wrong. And I think actually, certainly in the current cohort of people I've got around me in Carlisle and also in my peer group, I think I'm not big enough, and sort of obviously in terms of unwilling to take that from people when they are willing to say, and that's probably again one of the other bits about is please don't ever feel that you've got all the answers, because you haven't.
Yes, That is brilliant advice. I've got a Dr. Seuss quote running through my head, which is about the importance of being you because nobody is youier than you.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some much more intellectual ones around, but that is absolutely brilliant advice. Comparing yourself with the best version of yourself rather than the people around you, because we don't know what other people's motivations are, personal circumstances, etc. So brilliant advice to end this conversation on. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much. You've given me so much food for thought during this conversation. And also some extra energy. So I appreciate that very much. I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation, and thank you for being a really interesting guest, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Nina, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Huge thanks to Paul Evans, Chief Exec of Carlisle Support Services, for taking the time to talk us through his career story and also his 3 wishes for what he'd like to see change in the UK transport industry. I particularly enjoyed the quotes that Paul shared with us. I hope you enjoyed it too. Do let me know, won't you? And join us again for more intuitive insights.